Hi, I'm That Slavic Writer Guy, and today we're going to be talking about Giacomo Puccini's fifth opera, Tosca, the story of two lovers who both wind up dead, not just due to their blind love for one another, but also because of plain sheer stupidity. To find out how Tosca's brilliant plan to rescue her boyfriend from prison after she landed him there while not having to fuck the police chief all goes into the shitter, Gremo Opero. Tosca premiered at the Teatro Costanze in Rome on January 14th, 1900. It came out to lukewarm critical reception, but to general popular acclaim, which it has, of course, continued to enjoy through to the present day. The inception of Tosca as an opera, though, begins more than a decade prior to that, when Puccini first saw the play of the same name by Victorien Sardou. He went to his publisher and asked Ricordi, the publisher, to go to Sardou and ask for his permission to turn it into an opera, which is the first instance I really have ever heard of getting the rights to something actually being an issue with turning something into an opera, because it seems like to me before uh, people just saw the play as they did, for example, with Verdi and Il Trovatore, um, and saw it and then made it into an opera. But I guess this is going more into the 20th century when the opera Tosca premiered, so they had to go for the rights. And at first, Sardou was very skeptical of the fact that it could even be turned into an opera, but then was a snotty-nosed French guy and only wanted the opera to be turned into, only wanted the play to be turned into an opera by a French composer. Um, and said that he also had other composers interested in the piece, maybe largely as a way of trying to drive his price up. But nevertheless, an agreement was reached, and a librettist named Luigi Ilizza was given the responsibility of doing a libretto for the opera. But then a couple of years later, Ilizza basically told Puccini that this was not a suitable subject to be turned into an opera, and it couldn't be successfully adapted. So they went back to Sardou, and what did Sardou say? He basically said that, well, I don't really want to be entrusting my work to be turned into an opera by some rank amateur, which at the time, Puccini had not composed his first big breakout, Manon Lescaut, but Puccini nonetheless was very pissed and basically came back to Sardou and said, you know what? Fuck you and your play. And so Ricordi, the publisher, had already acquired the rights, but then Puccini was no longer interested in them. Another composer was assigned the responsibility of turning Tosca into an opera, Alberto Franchetti, I think. And he also was very uncomfortable with whether or not this could be turned into a successful opera from a much more complicated stage play. And it didn't become until around, I believe, uh, 1895, 96, when Puccini once again said, you know what, I want to do it. And by this point in time, Puccini had Manon Lescaut and La Boheme come out to great critical acclaim, which had really put him on the radar. And so he could kind of do whatever he wanted, to the point where he knew his next premiere was going to be watched with national eyes. So he returned to writing the play actually in the late 1890s, going through to the premiere in early 1900. So now that we have that backstory of how it almost dropped out of Puccini's hands twice, not only because of the French snot-nosedness of the playwright, but also because of Puccini having a stick up his ass when he was criticized as a young up-and-comer, uh, um, let's go on to our cast of characters of the opera that we are finally going to actually see after a history of 10 years of bullshit. We start off with a few minor characters. First of all, a sacristan who is played by a bass, and is the caretaker of the sacristy in the church where the opera's action opens. We then have Cesare Angelotti. He is a former consul of the Roman Republic that was set up after Napoleon's armies came down to Rome and basically kicked the Pope out. So in the aftermath of this, the French have left, and then the Kingdom of Naples has come down, and they've now occupied the city, installing uh, basically martial law, which the people that were running the Roman Republic understandably hate because they've been kicked out of power now. Then we have Mario Cavaradossi. He is a tenor, and he is one of the main characters of our opera. We then have his girlfriend, Tosca, who is, I guess this is kind of an insert in the operatic world, a famed opera player. And she is played by a soprano. Then we have Baron Scarpia, and he is the chief of the Naples-backed Reign of Terror, I guess you will. He's played by a baritone, and he is not only an asshole, but also a sexual predator. So following that, we have two of Scarpia's henchmen. One is played by a tenor, one is played by a bass, and then we have some bit parts, a jailer, and a shepherd boy. So there are other people who are in the chorus of this. It should be noted that instead of really choruses, recitatives, and bel canto arias, as was done back in the bel canto era, this opera is all done something called full composed or full sung, which was basically a technique originally pioneered largely by Verdi, which means that everything is joined up without these separate building blocks of opera being just desperate bits, as you would have seen in the era of Rossini. So it's not just the chorus, they're kind of just mixed in. And without further ado, let's move on to Act 1. Act 1 opens in a church in Rome. Angelotti, who is a former consul of Rome and is now on the run as a political prisoner, shows up and hides himself in his family's aristocratic chapel. He goes into hiding, and then this old sacristan, who's basically just a guy that cleans and takes care of the sacristy. He's a custodian, essentially. Shows up and begins cleaning it, and then has to stop and say some very devout prayers while he's doing that in an excuse for singing. So then Cavadarosky, the painter, shows up that evening. It's evening when this is going on, and resumes his work on the fresco of St. Mary Magdalene. So the sacristan, who's kind of nosy, goes, "Hey, you know what? I think really when you're painting that blonde-haired woman in the fresco, it's really, some woman who's been coming to the church a lot recently." And he doesn't know this, but it's actually Angelotti's sister who's been preparing to hide her brother in there. Cavadarosky goes on to really kind of brag and go, well, yeah, there is some resemblance to that girl who's been coming into the church, but there's also some to my hot and heavy lover, Tosca, the singer. That's also really who I'm painting this in inspiration from. And the sacristan, who is a very devout old guy, basically calls Cavadarosky a heathen for being involved in an extramarital relationship and promptly leaves. So now alone in the church, Angelotti emerges to show himself to Cavadarosky, who it turns out are friends and who both really would like to see the Roman Republic that was set up following Napoleon kicking the Pope out come back. And so Cavadarosky says, yeah, I'm going to help you out, man. You can come to my villa, and I'm going to hide you in the garden, and we'll both really pull one over on that asshole Scarpia, the police chief's eyes. This discussion goes on, and Avanti goes back to hiding in his little hidey hole, and Tosca shows up. And she immediately has heard some people talking, and of course her mind immediately goes to, aha, it must be another woman. And so she shows up really being suspicious of Cavadarosky as to, like, what have you been doing here? Who have you been talking to? Cavadarosky kind of has to talk her down off her pedestal. And at which point Tosca gets off her high horse, like told, and says, "Hey, Komodorowski, don't you want to go back to your villa this evening?" But then in another breath, she turns around, looks at the painting, and gets all jealous again. Who is that woman? And now musicologists can say that there are leitmotifs that Puccini used throughout the opera to be heralds for certain people and ideas and things, and that the leitmotif that you keep hearing for Tosca is really serene, and this must mean that Tosca isn't really jealous. But then, if that's the case, then why did she literally throw it in Komodorowski's face twice right when we first meet her? I mean, it's kind of like, God, if this girl is such a jealous bitch, Komodorowski, why didn't you dump her in the first place? He once again assures Tosca that he's being faithful to her. Angelotti comes back out and says, "You know what? I have an idea. I am going to disguise myself and flee as a woman with the clothes that my sisters left me." And Komodorowski basically is like, "Yeah, that's really cool," and he gives him the key to his house until it says, "I have a well, just hide in it," which actually sounds like a worse place than hiding in the chapel, but invites him to hide there. That's right on the cue for the cannon from the barracks signaling that Angelotti has escaped and that everyone knows about the escape. So Angelotti and Cavadarossi get the fuck out of the church. Now we have another wonderful excuse for singing here, with the sacristan showing back up with some more of the devout. And they're celebrating the fact that Napoleon has been defeated at this battle, which is going on up to the north of Rome as the events of the opera play out. The celebrations stop cold when Scarpia, the asshole chief of police, and his henchmen show up. And they have gotten a tip off that Angelotti has been hiding in the church. And so he orders it searched and finds out that there's an empty food basket, which is been left in the church. And it's right in the chapel that has the Avanti family's coat of arms. Scarpia gets all in the face of the sacristan. And, he kind of tells Scarpia, yeah, there's kind of been this girl coming in and this guy going out. And then this old consul came in. And so Scarpia is like, yeah, this is some pretty suspicious shit. He kind of starts thinking that Cavadarowski. And right on cue, Tosca shows up. And she is looking for her lover. But Scarpia basically goes, hey, you know what? That woman who your boyfriend's been painting in that fresco, it really looks a lot like Avanti's sister, and he must be really having an affair with her, because why else would he really be painting her in that fresco, right? And Tosca, being the jealous little bitch she is, falls for it, hook, line, and sinker. Then, left alone in the church, Scarpia reveals his real plans, which are not only to arrest and kill Angelotti and Cavaradossi, but also to basically pull some straight up quid pro quo shit by trying to, use her lover as a bargaining chip for getting in Tosca's pants. And then he joins in a very pious Te Deum sung by a chorus in the church for the Austrians' victory in the battle that Napoleon and them are fighting up north. Because it also keeps him in power, he kind of joins in and, probably going, oh, and by the way, God, let me fuck Tosca. The end of Act 1. Act 2 begins with Scarpia, the asshole police chief, at dinner time, sending a note to Tosca asking her to come to his private apartments. while he basically gloats to himself that he's both going to get to fuck Tosca and kill her boyfriend in one fell swoop. Um, and his henchman, whose name is Spoletta, arrives and says that Angelotti remains at large, but we got Cavadarossi. And he's been brought in for questioning, and they bring him right up to the top guy, Scarpia. And the painter's like, fuck you, Scarpia. I don't know anything about where my friend is. And you can go fuck yourself. I'm not going to divulge any information. Tosca, who's already there at the palace, which in a wonderful twist of irony in real life turns out to be the present-day French embassy in Italy, is singing a celebratory song and anticipating the Austrians' victory in the battle that they're having with Napoleon. And so, having gotten Scarpia's note, she shows up in his private apartments to see Cavadarossi being escorted in as well. And, all the two really have time to say in passing to one another is, basically, hey, Tosca, shit is going to go really bad for me, and I'm not going to say anything to them, and you better not the fuck either. And so then he's let off, and Scarpia comes out and is basically like, I am gonna fucking torture the shit out of your boyfriend, but you can spare him all of that plane if you tell me where Angelotti is hiding. And, I guess because Tosca and Cavadarossi are sharing the same house, Tosca would know this information. And at first she's like, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you to Scarpia. But then she starts hearing her boyfriend screaming in the next room and, having all of the mental, the resolve of a complete pussy, does exactly what her boyfriend told her not to do, and basically fesses up about where Angelotti has been hidden by her boyfriend, getting him in double shit. So in the short term, Scarpia basically says, okay, yeah, we're going to stop torturing him. And, he's dragged back in with wounds all over him right in front of Tosca. And, unsurprisingly, Cavadarossi is fucking pissed that Tosca did exactly what he told her not to do and ratted them out. Which means his head is now on the chopping block because he's been implicated. And of course, Tosca's stupidity by revealing that, in addition to her, getting suspicion thrown on her boyfriend because she's such a jealous bitch, gets matched by only Cavadarossi himself, who in that moment reacts to news that the Austrian forces have been routed in the battle and that Napoleon is on his way. And instead of keep his fucking big mouth shut, he, goes right in Scarpia's face and is be like, ha, there, your rule is about to end, asshole, and the Republic will fight on. So he basically just confessed to being a sympathizer against the current regime. And so he is hauled off to be executed. And Tosca, seeing all this, now feels, in hindsight being 2020, like shit that she just basically got her boyfriend sentenced to death by A, ratting him out in the chapel that something might be going on with him because she was jealous of a tryst that wasn't even happening, and then B, by fessing up that they knew that Angelotti was hiding in Cavadaroschi's house. And then, of course, Cavadarossi didn't really help himself, but still, it was kind of Tosca's fault in the beginning, right? And so she is just like, oh shit, what do I do? And Scarpia's like, wow, now everything's really going to plan. And so what follows for the rest of basically the Act 2 is a very long argument about whether or not Tosca is going to agree to fuck Scarpia in return for getting Cavadarossi released. God, I really am that Slavic writer guy. I keep calling him Cavadarossi, which is easier than all the Italian. But so she's at first like, no, 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 I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna fuck you. But then she hears the military call outside announcing that there's gonna be an execution, and she's like, oh shit, this is for reals, right? And so she, still equivocates and is like praying to God, going, God, is it okay if I fuck this asshole, even though I really don't want to save my boyfriend? And she tries to cop out and say, here's money, Scarpia, just take that. And, Scarpia is a good police chief, though, and he isn't going to take any bribe and money. He's like, no, I will only take your pussy, Tosca. So finally, she agrees, and Scarpia gloats even more, like, ha ha ha, my plan is all coming together. He's going to die, and Tosca is going to have to fuck me. So with Tosca there, when his henchmen show up, he still, equivocates about whether he's going to give the final order for Cavadarossi to be killed. And he looks at Tosca going, okay, bitch, what's it going to be? And so she finally says, yeah, I'll fuck you if you release him. And so he tells his henchmen to stay the execution, but he gives him what is kind of a code that just says, yeah, we're going to have it done like we did with this other guy, which naive Tosca takes to think that, oh yeah, it's going to be a fake execution. But no, he's saying in code to his henchmen, Scarpia is, yeah, we're going to kill that fucker. And so she believes this. And so as his henchman exits, Tosca puts one more condition on Scarpia, saying, well, once you release us and I've done the nasty with you, you still could have him arrested again or persecute us again. So we want a letter of safe passage out of Rome. And he's like, ha ha ha, honey, whatever you say, because he knows that Cavadaroschi's been ordered to be executed anyway. And he writes the letter, at which point Tosca finally shows some balls, and rather than fuck him, she stabs Scarpia to death, takes the letter of safe passage, and being the pious little girl she is, having an affair out of wedlock and then agreeing to fuck this guy out of wedlock, has to give the guy kind of his last rites and puts candles and a cross on his body before actually leaving and going to the fortress where her boyfriend was set to be executed, and where she thinks she's going to meet up with him after his mock execution. Moving on to Act 3. So as Act 3 opens, we set the scene with a shepherd boy, singing about shepherding, and the church bells ringing, announcing it's the break of dawn. And fun fact about these bells, when Puccini was composing Tosca, he became obsessed with the fact that all of the bells should sound exactly like they would sound of the actual bells at the actual churches in Rome. So he traveled to Rome, and then he ordered instrumental bells be cast to sound exactly like those bells. And everyone complained afterwards, after all of this effort, expense that Puccini went to, that, you know what, Puccini? They just sounded, like bells. But Puccini's very special bells ring, and we all know it's morning as Cavadarossi is let out of his cell and told he has an hour to live. And he starts writing a letter to Tosca, and he starts reflecting on how wonderful his life has been and his past memories and the fact that he's going to die. Then Tosca shows up and it's like, hey, honey, great news. I have this safe conduct letter that's going to let us get out of Rome after the police are really just going to shoot you with blanks and it's all going to be a sham. But you kind of got to have to sell being shot dead when they shoot you with the blanks. So he agrees, and they sing a love duet together, and they fantasize about how wonderful their life far the fuck away from Rome is going to be. And then he's led off to be executed after Tosca, who is a stage actress and a singer, gives him some more pointers on how to act dead. And so he's led away to the firing squad, and the gunshots are fired. And at first, Tosca thinks she's such a wonderful acting coach because she goes, "Wow, he did a great job, better than I could have expected." So she, after the soldiers leave, she runs right up to him playing dead and realizes, after urging him to get up quickly, that shocker, Kawadarowski is actually dead. She collapsed, weeping over him, just in time that for the voices of Scarpia's henchmen to be heard, realizing he's dead and that Tosca's murdered him. And so she rushes up to one of the parapets in the fortress where her lover just got killed, largely because of her own stupidity and his, and decides to solve everything by throwing herself off the rampart and dying. The end. So that's Tosca, the story of two very not star-crossed lovers who nonetheless wind up dead because of naiveness and sheer stupidity on both of their parts. I have to say that I have probably murdered the pronunciation of the names in this opera talk and probably some of those previously. I speak 4 languages fluently, but the languages that operas tend to be performed in, such as Italian, French, and German, are none of them. So just deal with it or bugger off. I am that Slavic writer guy. You can like this or don't, follow me or don't, do whatever you want, because I don't give a fuck. I'll still be here doing what I do anyway for the sake of the fact that I can do it, and just having that, if you don't like it, being a middle finger in its own regard. So, till my next opera talk, as we say in Slovenia, na svidenje ali greš pa je vat.